Good evening, history puffs. Now, question for the group. What goes better together than a good cigar and an intelligent conversation? Kevin?
I'll tell you, it's Germany winning World War One.
That's interesting, Kevin. Tell me
Yeah.
more about that. Okay, so when did they win? When did they win the war? 1914 or 1918?
I believe that we were discussing it'd be 1918 Germany.
Okay,
Yeah.
1918. All right, so that makes a lot of difference because if they win in 1914, there's not nearly the bad blood between them and France, right?
Yeah.
In 1918,
There
we've got
there would be the reparations.
wouldn't be the reparations, right? But in 1918, we've got the U.S. involved, potentially, right? Now, the way we're going to do this one is the U.S. either doesn't get involved all the way up to 1918,
Okay.
or they take too long to get involved, because the Spring Offensive is only going to succeed if the U.S. is not there.
Yes.
So we're going to say it does succeed, and they win, somewhere around March 1918.
Okay.
All right, so Germany's won. Let's start in Europe, okay? So Germany obviously takes over France. They take over the oil and coal fields in Alsace-Lorraine.
Yep.
Okay. So what are the war reparations going to look like in France? What do you think?
That's a good question. I don't know. Because if you think about it, right, Germany is going to want to maintain this empire that they just created. So I don't think it's going to be all that much, to be honest. They're definitely going to want to create that peacetime feel.
Right.
So
I don't think so either, because
maybe some re-education. Re-education, at least teaching with the language and stuff, because there is a language barrier when you think about it.
right. So I don't think so either, because not 50 years earlier, they did the same thing, right? They took over France.
Yeah.
And all they wanted was Alsace-Lorraine, and obviously there's going to be a German victory parade, in Paris.
Well, that's goes without saying.
Goes without saying.
Germans love their parades.
I know, they do. It's like my German friend Christian told me, why are there trees on the streets of Paris? It's because the German soldiers don't like to march in the sun. Okay, so I am convinced that the war reparations are not nearly going to be as bad, because in the way it actually happened, the Germans took over the French's land, but in this case, the Germans are on a foreigner's land. Their land's not been taken over.
No.
So they don't have that bad blood against France, not to the scale that they had against Germany.
Yeah, and they can't use what they used at the end of World War One when they had those gripes with the war reparations, and you see it again in World War Two, is that the land during the war reparations that was taken is splitting up the German population, which is what causes the issues in World War Two. So
That too. Absolutely. So I think that we're in agreement that the reparations are not going to be as bad, but one question I had for you is, there were a lot of known leftist movements in France.
Yeah.
All right, even before the war. So I think that a German victory is going to cause a lot of resentment, a lot of mutinying, as there was before the war
definitely
ended.
going to bring those revolutions to the front.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a conflict, like an internal, civil war, like in Russia, in France?
I mean, it's a very likely possibility if you think about it, right? So that liberal uprising, we'll call it, in France that was going on is also something that caused issues for Germany in World War II.
Right.
So I think if Germany did have that victory in 1918, I think we would see similar underground movements to World War II, where there would be a French resistance either backed by Britain or America to kind of make their life living hell. So
Okay. So the U.S. might potentially get involved in these movements. But the thing is, the U.S. had a Red Scare, I think in the 20s.
yeah.
Didn't they? I don't think that the U.S. would have backed any kind of leftist movement in France.
See, my only reasoning behind this, right, because I do know about that Red Scare, and they are hesitant with leftist movements at that time period, is you have to think of like a greater enemy situation here. And we were talking a little bit about this before we had started the recording, that at this time, if Germany won, they would be that monopolar balance of power in the world,
Right.
as Britain refused to really do anything. America kind of stayed in their side, so it's just Germany with Russia during that civil war. So you taking France out of the equation, now you're thinking there's a huge power, okay, that has a lot of land and now a lot of oil and resources.
Right.
What's going to happen after that? So then it brings to question, will Germany stop?
That's what I wanted to talk about. So you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want some milk, right? You give Hitler Czechoslovakia, what does he want next?
Exactly.
So is Germany going to stop when they defeat France?
The question is not will they stop, or if they stop, it's when they stop.
When they stop.
Because, the whole point of World War One and World War Two was like German reunification, right?
Yeah.
And then the reason why they went into France is because they wanted those oil fields, or the resources in Alsace-Lorraine, right?
Right.
So
So once they get them.
once they get them, there's always other places with resources that people want,
Right.
right? Because then you think Middle East. Because once you have access to France, you'll have access to the Middle East.
Okay.
Right?
Let's summarize up.
And then we were talking about Hungary.
We were. Yeah.
Okay, which is also going to bring question of resources if they were Germany had good relations with Hungary. So it's always a resource battle, and it's going to be brought up when you're talking with Germany.
Right. So let's go ahead and summarize up France really quick. So war reparations, not so bad, right? There's going to be leftist movements, definitely, possibly a civil war. But Germany is pretty much going to be done in France, and they're going to move on to look at other things, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and discuss what we're smoking. So, Kevin, what are you smoking tonight?
So tonight I am smoking an El Rico Habano. It has, you can't really see that there. It has a Nicaraguan filler, and a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. It's very nice. It's a little nutty. It's almost a little sweet, actually.
I think it's a little flavored on the tip.
Yeah,
actually.
a little
what do you,
bit.
What do you think that flavor is?
I don't know. It's not sugar, like most flavorings of cigars would be. It is nice, though. I'm not normally a big, flavored cigar person, but this one's nice.
Yeah, like acid. That's all. Like
Acid is extremely
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah,
That's really sugary. Because I feel bad, but this is a factory smoke, so it's not even nearly as good as his cigar is. But this is Drew Estate, so it's all Nicaraguan, a Nicaraguan Puro, Maduro variant too. So
those are good.
nice and thick.
I do enjoy those.
Yeah.
Is that your factory smokes one?
yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
Those
They're
are
real
good
good.
cigars. For the price too.
Oh yeah,
Really
no, this
good.
is your bargain smoke right here. My humidor is full of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can confirm that.
I call them humidor fillers, like the ones you give out to people and.
And he does do that with our cigar group. So.
All right, so you brought up the Middle East, and that's actually something I really wanted to talk about from the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Right. So Lawrence of Arabia is waging revolutions inside of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
All right. The Ottoman Empire's main big military objectives are over. Gallipoli's over. The conflict with Russia, that's over. So they're fighting their revolutions inside.
Yeah.
Those are going to continue after the war ends because it's pretty much independent of the war.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be a lot of German aides. They're going to send their armies. They're going to send them to the Middle East to quell those revolutions, so that they can get the oil fields and things like that from the Ottoman Empire.
Because of their relations with the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So they had good relations with the Ottomans since before the war, because in I think 1912 they built the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad. So they obviously had really good relations with them. So is the Ottoman Empire going to become one of those, a powerful nation out of this?
There's a good chance that they do, especially with an alliance with a very strong nation like Germany if they had won that war.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk down on Germany at all at this time period. Even if they had lost that during the war, they were a very strong nation. So imagine what they would have become afterwards. So whenever you have a strong ally, you yourself as a nation are going to become stronger. So if the Ottoman Empire all of a sudden gets this huge backing from Germany, right, and Hungary, well, that's not what goes without being said.
Right.
You're going to gain power regardless of where you are before or after.
Well, I think it's interesting because the Ottoman Empire, or Turkey, had such a history, because right before this war started, they were a crumbling nation. They were about to fail.
Well, yeah,
so
you,
I think
you do see the fall of the Ottoman Empire shortly after this. So,
right. And I think it is the end of World War I that does bring out the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, what is that, 1920 when they
Yeah.
fall? It's right around then. So it's
Yeah.
shortly after World War I ends.
No, very short. But with the stimulus from, this new world power, Germany,
Yeah.
right? I do think that the Ottoman Empire would have become a more stable nation, and I think we would have avoided conflicts today like Afghanistan and
So
Iraq.
that's a very interesting take on that. Many
Yeah.
historians will say that the fall of the Ottoman Empire was something that couldn't be avoided. So
So here's my take on that. So there's this event in history that happened, all right, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and actually pretty much right before the end of the war, called the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Okay.
No American kid can tell you about the Sykes-Picot Agreement, but every Afghan
one
child,
cannot.
every Afghan and Iraqi child can tell you exactly what happened with the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Okay.
And what that was Britain and France doing what Britain and France do best. They took a ruler and they divided up
Yeah.
the Middle East, all right, creating spheres of influence, putting rival tribes together and causing instability in the region. If Britain and France don't win the war, the Sykes-Picot Agreement doesn't happen. Now, the Ottomans had already had stability in the region. It might have been corrupt and tyrannical. There's the Armenian genocide and all that, but there was stability, all right? And if they win the war, well, then they're just going to go back to the way things were.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's not going to be the Middle East today if the Germans win.
So it wouldn't be the Middle East as we see it today.
As we see it today.
Yeah. Okay. You would see more of an Ottoman Empire-esque.
Yeah.
Because it probably would have changed at some point. However, you're saying it would be similar.
Yeah, I'm saying it'd be similar because now European nations aren't going to divide up the Ottoman Empire because
Yeah.
the Ottoman Empire is just going to get stronger.
So then, how would Africa look? Because
So,
Africa
yeah.
played a huge role in World War II. Now, if we're saying Germany wins World War I, there's a possibility that World War II never happens.
Yeah, there is. Although I think, broadly speaking, there are going to be conflicts after World War I
Yeah.
if Germany wins, but not on the scale of World War II. I think they're going to be like 19th century level conflicts, you know.
Okay.
But-
singular nations.
Right, singular nation. So we're moving away from, to sum up the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans become a strong nation and the Middle East doesn't happen as we see it today.
Yeah.
Now moving on to Africa, so, you know, imperialism, colonialism were huge things, you know,
Yeah.
going on. I think that Germany would have taken a lot of territory in Africa.
Yes, I
You
would
see
agree with
people
you.
like Paul Leto von Vorbeck waging guerrilla campaigns throughout the entire war. They obviously wanted African territory.
Yeah. Well, there comes the resources. Like I said earlier, when does resources
Right.
become enough?
Diamonds, you know, gold,
Minerals.
all
Yeah.
that stuff. So Africa could
Which,
be,
during this industrialization era, those minerals and stuff, those were necessary. You needed those, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
why Africa became such an important role in World War II.
oh, absolutely. So I think that Germany, they had a lot of like little holdings, you know, spread throughout Africa. So I think they're going to take a lot of land, partially because they can, like a lot of French land.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be able to get a lot more out of France than they will out of Britain. In fact, I don't even think they're going to get Britain to the tables, right? Britain's just going to retreat to England. They're not going to go to the tables with
As they do.
right
Yeah.
with Germany. So a lot of French land is going to be taken, but I think a lot of British land is going to be up for grabs because now Britain can't defend their territories as well anymore.
See, I don't think that'll be true at all because we were discussing earlier, right? Britain is a maritime power, and they have always been a maritime power.
Right.
They've never been a huge infantry-style army. Think about it. All of their armies have been marine-esque, right?
Right.
They invade on ships. They use the waters to their advantage with supply chains and quick reinforcement of troops to win wars. That's how Britain works, and that's what colonialism is, right? That is how you run colonies. You run them through a maritime power, which Germany never has really been a maritime power.
Right.
Now we may see this come out with France now being out of the picture. They may be able to use their resources and their waterways.
Right.
So that's something to take into account with that.
Yeah, it is. So I actually have a point to counter that, and that is if the Ottoman Empire, you know, comes out a stronger nation, I think that Britain is going to lose the Suez Canal.
Okay.
I think they're going to lose a lot of their naval power, like in Africa.
I can see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. I agree with you.
Although the problem is, like you said, the naval power. So if Germany starts building more ships, right, that's going to be like, it's going to provide motivation for Britain to attack them and to sort of make
which
a
would
preemptive
bring
strike.
on that further
Yeah.
violence that you were talking about.
So let's bring it back to Africa. So I think we're in agreement that Germany's going to take a lot of, if not all of, France's holdings in Africa,
Yeah.
right? which is not going to go down well with the French.
No.
Okay, so with Britain, all right, the way we're talking about it, it seems like there's going to be another war with Britain.
Yes, that is a very strong possibility.
Okay, so is it going to be Operation Sea Lion 20 years early, or is it going to be something different, like maybe Britain attacking Germany?
So I believe it could be something of the Western powers being the aggressors on the flip side. You were talking about earlier that you believe it's a monopolar balance of power in the world.
I do.
But I see it more as a maybe a monopolar unbalanced power, right? So it's
Right.
going to lead to a lot of the smaller powers allying themselves with each other to fight the greater power, which
Guy
is
knows all the terminology. Monopolar, unbalanced.
so. I'm going to break that down a little bit. Then I apologize. That's just talking that there is one big power, and there is not a lot of other power going around. So it's going to cause a lot of the smaller nations to group together to focus their power, so that they can actually take on the threat, right? Which is Germany winning after their victory in 1918, right? So if that is the case, I do believe that Britain's involvement is inevitable, right? If Germany wins World War One, but a big thing is that American involvement, right?
Yeah, that's big.
So with France, who is allied with America, being gone and out of the picture, America's already feeling the trade disputes, right?
Right.
Over that, because now they have to deal with German, not French trade.
Right.
Now, you're also hearing from another American ally, right, who is saying, hey, we need to take care of this. And so what I'm saying is, even though you're saying that a World War II is won't happen, but smaller, like 19th century wars will come out, I do believe that Second World War is inevitable if you're talking about a British war. I think Britain will take their allies, and America will eventually be involved to take back France.
Okay, so you think it's going to be...
It'll be a
Yeah.
Western power aggression instead of a. Well, I mean, they were still aggressive, and they made aggressive moves when they invaded France and retake France in World War II.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the whole start of the war will be Western aggression as opposed to German aggression.
I like that take. It's the War of French Independence.
Yes.
That's a really good take on that. Okay. And you're saying what that would look like is, I guess, a lot like the Normandy invasions. Like you have
It would look
America
a lot like the Normandy
Britain.
invasions. Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny is when I was doing a lot of research for this, one conclusion I came to is a lot of the stuff that happened in World War II would happen directly after a German victory in World War I.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's one of them.
I don't think it would be delayed as much for the 25, 30 years as it was when Germany lost. If Germany won, I think you'd be talking 10, 15 years afterwards.
Absolutely. And I think, so question for you, what do you think would be the pull factor for Britain and America to invade France and liberate France?
So I think it's that trade. I think it's trade.
Trade?
Trade would be a huge issue. Especially during this time period, they're all building off of each other with technology, right?
Right.
So the Americans were providing the Germans and French with war technology, with just industrialization stuff, right? Because they're still going through an industrial revolution during this time period. So that passing of information and trade is the most important thing that was happening at the time.
Okay.
So now you have a trifecta, right? You have the main alliances in the world. Okay, it's France and America, and then Britain and France, and then America and Britain. Right. You just took one of those major players out at that time. So you're taking away a huge information pool, right?
Right.
So I think just with the lack of resources and information and trade that would be coming from France, it would be more so coming from Germany. I think that's what would be that major pull.
Okay. So potentially a war of French independence is going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So that's That makes for some good fan fiction right there.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, do you think that would happen maybe 5 or 10 years after the war?
I'm thinking maybe 10 to 15. You have to give it with trade at least. You have to give it some time on the international level. You have to give it time to actually settle in and
Right.
realize that holy mackerel, this is an issue.
Yeah. That might actually look a lot like the War of American Independence. You're going to get rebel movements in France that are backed by foreign nations.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. That is what I believe will happen.
Okay. I guess the whole rebel movements part didn't really click for me until until
right?
now. Yeah.
So maybe we should start it here.
Maybe we should have. Yeah. Ah. Anyway, I tell you what. There's something about lighting a cigar with a Zippo that's just so classic. You know what I
See,
mean?
the taste of the lighter fluid, it just puts me off.
Does it?
I love the smell of it, and I love using Zippos. They are so reliable, but it's just that the flavorless and the odorless use of butane is just I love that so much better. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah, no, a lot of people do complain about sulfur, contaminating the cigar and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
especially I like matches too, lighting cigars. But
Matches
you
are great.
You have to let the head burn out first. You
Yeah.
can't have that sulfur and magnesium still in that.
Or you can light a cedar spool.
Or
you know.
you can light a cedar spool.
That's the best. Everyone can agree that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's very classy.
All right, so let's talk about the big bear in the east. All right,
Okay.
Russia.
Go to
So
Russia.
So here's what I believe. The events in Russia before and after the end of the war, so the revolution and the Tsar abdicating, that was happening pretty much independent of the war. Was it accelerated by the war? Yes, but
I think you're looking at an additional 5 to 10 years before that actually happens. If World War II or World War One had been a victory from the Germans.
well, no. So they actually capitulated before the war ended.
Okay.
In 1917.
All right.
And so here's an interesting question. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, Germany takes a lot of Russian land, like Ukraine, Poland.
Yeah.
They take that. So if they win the war, those don't become independent nations. They're just part of Germany.
Yeah.
All right. So they're
part
German
of the
ruled.
German power. Yeah.
So you have those peoples who are now occupied by Germany. Are they happy or off? I don't know. The revolution is still going on, all right? And I still think that the revolution itself will play out as it did. I think the Reds are going to win, all right? So you have Russia, has just gone through a civil war. Now Germany's the victor, and you've got them on their border, right?
Yeah.
What do you think's going to happen? Is there going to be a conflict?
So, I am so glad you actually asked this because I was thinking about this earlier. So, Hitler was the only reason why hot take, and you could change my mind. Hitler was the only reason they invaded Russia.
Okay.
The only reason. And if we're talking that Germans win in 1918, there is a chance that Hitler doesn't come to power at all because his big come to power was we will reunify the German people.
Right.
Right?
And if there's no people to reunify,
Then there's no Hitler. Okay? Maybe in a different country, but there is no, like we were talking about earlier, there may be a French Hitler. We
Right.
don't know, right? But in this case, there's no German people to reunify because they've been reunified. So there's no German Hitler. Okay?
Right.
Therefore, I believe that there is no German invasion of Russia.
okay.
Okay? So there are a lot of Jews in Russia, right? And that was a main reason why Hitler wanted to. He wanted to expand into there. He wanted to flex his arms a little bit, right? And because of his anti-Semitic beliefs, right? That was some major pushes for him to go
Into Russia.
into Russia. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't believe that would ever actually happen.
Interesting. So Russia is then just going to become one of the other unbalanced poles.
Yeah, and I believe
In
you
the
would
world.
see a very, very destabilized alliance between Britain, America, and Russia as you did in World War II.
Right. Well, I don't know if America is going to ally with Russia because in this alternate history we propose, the Reds are going to win, and the U.S. is very anti-communist.
Yes, America's always been very anti-communist, though, if you
Right.
think about it.
They have.
Even in World War II, there was some major pushback in the alliance with Russia, but they understood that it was a necessary thing.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. They did ally with them.
They
in
did
World War II.
ally with Russia. However,
Yeah.
Russia was not a main player at the table because they were asking for help they didn't have much to give because they were dealing with Hitler.
Right.
Now they're actually going to have resources to give. So I believe they may come to play as a major actor.
Okay, I think that it would have to come out of necessity, though. Because,
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you'd
So
have to have
it
some
would-
kind of...
It would definitely be a, hey, Russia, we need to get back France.
Yeah.
Will you help us?
Right.
I believe that's what kind of situation we would be talking about then.
And if they could tie up Germany again, they'd have a war on two fronts, and that way they could liberate France, you know.
Which goes back to that Western power aggression to liberate France.
That's interesting. The war of Western aggression.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
because
a funny
you
thing.
always think of it as the war
German.
of German aggression. Yeah,
Right.
It's an interesting thing to
Yeah.
actually think about.
But that would totally happen. You
Yeah.
know, the war of French independence. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so Russia is not gonna fight Germany anytime soon that we know of. But one thing you brought up is something I want to talk about. So the Jews. All right. So there was a lot of anti-Semitic sentiment in France. All right. So even before the war, there was the Dreyfus affair.
Yeah.
Right. You know about that, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's not going to be a Zionist movement. Okay. Actually, no. Is there going to still be a Zionist movement if the Germans win?
So I believe that there are certain situations in history that just won't ever change, right? The Jewish population was always seen as a stain on humanity
Yes.
by other nations and other religions.
Yes.
Right? So Christianity is very similar to it. So there wasn't too much with we'll call it like Puritan Christianity of the Americas, right? There was a lot of sentiment for that.
Well, the Catholics hated the Jews.
However, thank you. I was going right to there.
Okay.
France is an extremely heavy Catholic
Yes. nation,
right? So that's where that sentiment comes from.
Can I say a fun fact really quick?
Go ahead.
Do you know where the Jews own the bank stereotype comes from? So back in the day, only Catholics could own land.
Okay.
All right. So the ways that Jews made their money was they started banks and they charged interest
Okay.
because
So
Catholics
they
couldn't charge
created
interest.
the interest
Yeah.
system. Yeah.
So they did.
All right.
So yeah. But anyway, so large anti-Semitic movements in France.
Yeah.
Going
So
on.
where I was going with this was there are certain scenarios in history that just won't change. Okay. I do believe that history does have chances of changing whether certain like scenarios happen, right? So World War I could have gone differently if they had if Germany had not invaded through Belgium, like that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
So I believe that this anti-Semitic issue, okay, of the Nazis, the Nazism belief, right? Even though they were the national party and they were for German reunification, there was a heavily anti-Semitic belief with it. I believe we would have seen possibly something rise from France with that.
See, I was just thinking about that. You know, a sort of Nazi party arising in France.
And it would have been under the same like scenario of what German was. We need to reunify the French territories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would have.
Yeah, because you think about it, you always say people always say this. History has a knack for repeating itself.
Because what was the thing that France wanted was Alsace-Lorraine out of the war.
Yes, and
You know?
when Germany lost World War I, what did they want? They
wanted
wanted to reunify the German lands that was
Right.
taken from them by the Allied forces, right?
Right.
And they wanted Alsace-Lorraine.
Alsace-Lorraine. Yeah.
So I would see, but again, a weird turn of events. This would become Western aggression. Okay, so that anti-Semitic belief, you may have seen possibly Britain or America back them just because they wanted France to come back,
Right.
which is a weird take because then you're seeing, holy crap, the Americans and British are backing the French, like
Right.
with this anti-Semitic belief. That would be a huge change of events in world history if that was the case.
Absolutely. Man, the war of Western aggression. So then is the Zionist movement still going to happen? Like, are we still going to see them try and take over Palestine again? Because the Middle East is a different place now.
Yeah, it's an entire empire.
Right.
So
Did the Ottomans
maybe-
have a big hold on Palestine and places like that?
I don't think so. I think it was still in their territory, but it wasn't one of their main territories, I don't think.
Right. So they
I'm not too
They
familiar with
did.
Middle Eastern history.
they did control Palestine, but
Yeah.
again, their main places of influence were the Suez Canal, Turkey, right, Gallipoli, places like that.
right around the Mediterranean.
So if the Jews were to invade Palestine, they'd be fighting the Ottomans.
Yes.
I think the Ottomans would back the Palestinians.
Yes, which
Yeah.
would then bring in the Germans.
Right.
And then, hold on, that may create an anti-Semitic belief in the Germans again.
Maybe.
Which,
It wouldn't be hard to sway the German people to
no,
hate the Jews.
no. And then that may actually cause another war of anti-Semitic belief.
Right.
And
But I
then
don't
the Western
think...
powers coming in to help with that, which then reverts back to the history of the Western powers helping to fight this anti-Semitic belief. So
Well, when you say the Western powers,
we're
France...
talking Britain in America, and then
Right.
France may help Britain in America to help and back these anti-Semitic, or sorry, the Jews fighting against the anti-Semitic Ottoman Empire and the Germans.
Interesting. Well, we were just saying that the French were the ones who were the anti-Semites, right?
Mhm.
So, I guess the only reason they would back... That'd be a interesting flip of allegiances,
That's-
which we see in history, like Italy. They
A
flipped
lot.
allegiances.
It happens
Yeah.
a lot.
Because now the tables have turned, and they can support the Jews to then fight Germany.
Yes.
In the Ottoman
Yeah. So what
Empire.
I'm
Yeah.
saying is, if any one of these situations happens, there is always many scenarios where one small thing could actually change the outcome of that fight. Whether France becomes that anti-Semitic French Nazi party, or if they become like in already current history, where they were seen as the the nation that was taken over by the anti-Semitic
Right.
nation. So
So let me ask you a question real quick. This is sort of rhetorical. All right. So you've got all these alliances, right? Britain and England are trying to help out France get liberated from German occupation, right? And then a small country, a small group of people, the Jews, invade a small country called Palestine. And then all the allegiances hop in on each other and help out. What does that look like? That looks like the start of World War One.
yeah, and World War II.
and World War II, yeah. So, is there going to be a second World War?
And we keep
Started
coming-
by the Jews.
We keep coming
I
back
don't
from that.
know.
Like you never know what's going to happen. History has a knack for repeating itself. So if you change certain events, that same outcome may still come.
Absolutely. No, that's... Man, that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about is like the conflicts that are going to happen after World War One as a result of that.
I think a big one that you'll see is that you may not see until later on is the Japanese Empire.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Eastern nations.
You want to talk
All right.
about Eastern nations now, right? Because Germany was allied with Japan
Yeah.
in World War II, but that was solely out of necessity,
Yes.
right? That was only out of necessity. So will you see an alliance between Japan and Germany now?
Well, no. You know why? Because Japan took German lands in China.
Yeah.
Remember that. So
So you may be adding a new player to the Allied forces in that new World War II.
yeah, you could be.
Yeah.
Now, China is another unstable region that the European nations have carved up, right? Right now, there's a nationalist conflict going on between Chiang Kai-shek and, the Communist Party.
With huge backing, or I apologize, let me rephrase that. There is huge pushback from the Americans, from the U.S., because they're seeing all of this extremely brutal tactics, especially from the Japanese,
Yeah.
during this time period in China, and they just want to keep open border trade with China.
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, the U.S. was probably one of the most involved foreign nations in China, in the imperialist days. So the Chinese theater, I think there's going to be further German occupation, definitely. They're going to take French holdings, for sure. I don't know. Is there going to be a war coming out of the East, do you think?
there's a good chance that there's a war coming out of the East, because you're looking at some Japanese aggression in German territory, right? Like you were saying before. And we all know how Germans react to you taking their land. And then also you're looking at Germans pushing into China, which, again, if they start pushing into China and messing with that free trade and open trade that the Americans have with it, you're looking at some pretty big issues that will arise with Germany and America.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that...
And I'm saying America because Canada is involved with that, and so is Mexico slightly. So.
Yeah. Well, fun fact, I'm pretty sure the Zimmerman telegram was completely made up by British intelligence because it was presented to the Americans by the British. You know, how much it had to do with getting the Americans involved, I don't know, but you know, I'm convinced it was fabricated. Yeah, no, definitely.
It's a chance.
Definitely a chance. Okay, I think that's really all that I have to say about my speculations for Germany winning the First World War.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff. I definitely didn't expect to talk about a war of French independence. For some really good.
Hey, you got some good
know.
questions going on. We got
Yeah.
some good discussion. So.
Man in the French Castle. That's what we'll call that one.
Man in the French
Man
Castle.
in the French Castle. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well. All right, Kevin. God damn. I hate it when you inhale it like that. Kevin, thanks a lot for coming on the show, man.
Of course.
Yeah. Like I said, we're not historians. We're just guys who like to smoke cigars and talk about history.
Yeah. So, fellow historians and cigar lovers, keep on puffing.
Keep on puffing. All right.